to show you today for my pro tips for perfect are some different ways that you can play the left hand. When we're playing perfect, you'll notice that a lot of the left hand was in dotted quarters in a couple of different patterns, like this and this. But it sounds really cool if you can add a broken chord pattern instead of just doing the solid chords. And first I'm going to show you what the patterns are, and then secondly I'm going to show you where you can incorporate them into the piece. So the first pattern I'm going to show you that works really, really well in 6/8. Remember that a lot of pop songs have a 4-chord pattern. So our 4 chords are G, E minor, C, and D. So I've just taken those broken chords, played it up, and then down. So you're just taking that triad, broken, going up, and then down. And then we switch to E minor, which is this chord here. And then we're going to switch to C major. And then D. So let me just show you those 4 chords in a row. And then E minor. And D. So that's the first pattern. Now let's just quickly look at the song, and what you notice in this piece is that these chord patterns actually go for 2 bars. So we've got G twice, we have E minor twice, we've got C twice, and then D twice. So let's practice that pattern now in a 2-bar pattern rather than just the 1 bar. And I would encourage you to practice it just like that at home. Now, one of the great things about this arrangement is that these chord patterns are written in for you already. So if you want, you can read the right hand and add this type of a left hand pattern. The G chord is written here, but it actually continues over there. So when you're reading through the song, you can just look at the chord name rather than trying to read the notes, and you can incorporate this pattern into it. So what I'm going to suggest, rather than doing this pattern right on verse 1, it sounds really nice in the piece if you can start out with what's written. But when the verse 2 comes in, sometimes it's nice to change up a little bit what the left-hand pattern is. So I'm just going to flip ahead in the song. Here's verse 2 right here. And starts with, again, our G, E minor, C, and D pattern. And I'm going to show you how this pattern can fit along with the right hand. So we start out, we're going to play it as written all the way to verse 2. Now we want to add something maybe a little bit more complicated or sounding a little bit more professional. So I'm going to start just on. So let's see how that sounds together. I'm going to start on the little pickup. If I do a little bit faster, it'll sound like this. And you can see it adds a little bit more movement. It sounds a little bit nicer, a little bit more professional. It'll fill it out a little bit more, but without actually a whole lot of extra practice. It's just figuring out how the 2 hands line up. And the nice thing about doing pop songs is that sometimes the right hand notes and rhythms don't have to be perfect. You can make up a little bit of your own rhythm sometimes. As long as you're getting a full 6 beats in the bar and it sounds like the tune, then that'll work. So let's take a look at my second left hand option. And I'll show you one more pattern that we can do. So here's option number 2. And I'll just write a quick note for you. Option 1 was really great with verse 2. So for option 2, let's take a look down here. Rather than doing the triad, I've taken the notes of the triad and I've split them up like this. So now I have a G, D, G. So between my pinky and my thumb is an octave, and then I have the fifth of the chord in between right here. So we've left out the B and we've just done this. This is a typical left-hand pop pattern. So it's very, very common. If you haven't learned it before, you'll want to learn it because you use it in a lot of different songs. So we're going to use a similar idea. 3 notes up, repeat the top note, and then come down. And then E minor would look like this. C. And then D. So once again, we remember that this song, each chord went for 2 bars. So if you want to give that a good practice ahead of time, you want to practice the pattern 2 bars for each chord. So G chord twice, E minor, C, So get comfortable with that pattern first, and then for this one, we are going to put this on the repeat of the pre-chorus, and you could also do the chorus itself. So let's flip back. So when you've repeated after doing verse 2, and you're back on the pre-chorus again right here, this is where we can put that option 2 for the left hand. So if you want to do the same idea with putting the rhythm in here so that you get an idea of how that's going to fit, feel free to do that. I just did 2 bars for you so you get the idea, but you can go through the piece and fill that in if you find it helpful. If your ear guides you with the patterns, then that's okay too. So here, let me do it slowly for you on one chord pattern so you can get an idea of how this sounds together, and then I'll show you also at speed. Notice here we had this G over D. I just used the G chord and it sounded totally fine. So if you want to stick with that pattern for that, it totally works. So let me do that again for you at tempo so you can see how it sounds. Sounds great, right? And it's actually pretty easy to incorporate. So arranging can be a lot of fun. It can be really exciting. It can be a nice way to add some variety to your performance, especially in a pop song when you have a repeated section and you don't want to play it exactly the same way every time. Or it can also help to add a little bit of an arc to the piece. And what I mean by that is often pop songs start out simple, and then they get more and more elaborate as you go through. Sometimes more instruments are added, or the drums get a little bit heavier, or the vocals get a little bit bigger, maybe background singers. So we can't always do all of that extra instruments when we're playing on piano, but we can add extra filler into the piano part to make it sound a little bit fuller. So this second pattern you could use through the pre-chorus. You could do it on the chorus part as well. And I would stop it right when you got to the interlude right here. And then I would play the full coda, just simple again, because you want it to wind back down. You want the piece to start simple, build through the middle, and then towards the ending, bring it back down again so that it's a nice, simple, and beautiful finish. So I hope those pro tips are helpful for you. Be sure to check out my full performance video of Perfect, as well as other videos on our channel.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching Merriam's Online Academy. Check back here for more videos and don't forget to subscribe below.